Welcome back to Killer Fun, where we explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week. I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And today, we are talking about Dead Boy Detectives. They believe everyone matters. And I'm so here for it.
Okay, this show is like candy.
It is like candy. It's so sweet, and it goes down real smooth.
Yeah. It does.
Yeah.
It's just...
I've added this to the list of things that my family should watch together. I've only seen the first episode, and I'm not going to watch anymore until the whole family can sit down. I'll tell you why.
Because this is the type of show nobody would watch with me.
Okay.
Like, this will be mom's personal device right here because,
Oh, nobody will watch it with you?
I'll
force my family to watch it with me.
But I totally enjoy it.
Yeah. It was adorable. So let's talk about this sweet little cast. Mm-hmm. Only going to talk about the three, mostly the three main characters.
Okay.
George Rextrew is Edwin Payne, and this is his first major role. He did a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, you're adorable.
He is adorable.
Good job. Good job landing the lead. When you don't have anything big on your resume already.
That's pretty amazing.
It is great. Jaden Reverie is Charles Roland. Now, he was in a guilty pleasure of mine, Fate the Winx saga.
Okay.
So it's like a fairy boarding school.
Oh, okay.
On Netflix.
Okay.
It was only one season of it. I was hoping they were going to make more.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah. He was in that, so that's why he looked familiar to me. Mm-hmm. And so it's also very much a teen sort of show.
Yeah, yeah. Well, to be fair, this one is...
Absolutely a teen sort of show, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, like it can appeal to a broader audience. But
right.
This is totally one I can watch with my almost 16-year-olds and have it be like something we will both enjoy and have a good time with. And he was also in the British musical series The Lodge.
Oh,
so evidently he can sing. So I hope as I go through this that we get to hear him sing at some point.
Yeah.
Cassius Nelson is Crystal Palace. And she was in a British soap opera called Hollyoaks and a series of unfortunate events.
Oh.
She was in that. She's a British actress.
I know. The American accent is on point.
She did a great job with her American accent.
I mean, that's hard. She's got to have an American accent all the time. She's not. Yeah. She's a lead role, so I don't understand how people do that on the regular.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
y'all. Well, yeah, that's crazy.
I can't do it convincingly.
No,
in any accent. So, yeah,
props.
Yeah, and then I did also want to mention Death. We see Death is played by an actress named Kirby.
Okay.
She also goes by Kirby Howell Baptiste, but I guess she's trying to move to the single name moniker.
Oh, okay.
But she was Death in The Sandman as well.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Uh-huh. Oh, well, we'll talk about that. There's reasons.
Okay.
Shall we recap?
Yes.
Okay. The brains and the brawn.
It's so cute.
Edwin and Charles, they're just a couple of plucky young men with a desire and ability to solve unsolvable crimes, which they can do because they're dead.
They're dead.
That's right. That's why they're uniquely qualified to solve these particular crimes. While they may not have been looking for a new partner, a client comes in asking for help for her friend, Crystal Palace. The demon-possessed psychic, once rid of her demon, can see the dead boys because of her gift. And she brings some unique qualities that Edwin and Charles lack, not the least of which is, being corporeal. The dead boys team up with their unlikely partner to solve a crime that Crystal is drawn to, but only because her crime is yet unsolved. Despite being freed of her demon, her crime isn't yet fixed.
Yes. There's mystery.
Right.
There's mystery.
Yeah. So the reason that Kirby was Death in The Sandman and Death in Dead Boy Detectives is because they are in the same universe.
Oh.
So the Dead Boy Detectives actually made their very first appearance in the Sandman comic book in April of 1991, number 25. So I don't know if you ever read any Sandman back in the day.
No.
Probably not. Doesn't seem like your thing.
No.
I read a fair bit of it.
Okay.
So the way the comic book was set up was kind of like the way the X-Files was set up.
Okay.
So there would be, episodes or books towards the primary main story.
Right, yeah.
And then there would be
offshoots.
yeah, kind of like standalone episodes that would sometimes feed back into the main story, inform it in some way.
Right.
So these characters kind of did that.
Okay.
So that was they appeared in this particular comic because they informed the story of dream. So there's dream and death and desire and all of these different human emotions that get a godlike deity that supposedly rules over them.
Oh, okay.
In the comic books.
Okay.
So the primary character is Dream, the Sandman, and these characters supported his story.
That's so fun.
Yes. And then a couple years later, December of 1993 and January of 1994, Neil Gaiman and his artist Matt Wagner, who collaborated on The Sandman, also did they're called annuals. So they're kind of like larger books. Mm-hmm. And they were called The Children's Crusade.
Okay.
I remember very clearly when these came out. And that is when Edwin and Charles got the official title of Dead Boy Detectives.
Okay.
Was in that particular issue. And then another artist and author got together and did a 4-issue miniseries of the Dead Boy Detectives, the Sandman Presents.
That's so fun.
Yes,
wow.
It was very cool. So it makes perfect sense that the person who played Death in The Sandman and the person who played Death in Dead Boy Detectives
is the same.
Are the same person.
That makes
because they live in the same universe.
That's so fun. I didn't realize that this was not a singular story, that it was connected to a broader universe, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't into comics.
No,
I really didn't read a lot.
Oh.
I wasn't. That's when I was 100% music.
Okay.
Right, that's all. And so that's what I did. I didn't read a lot.
Yeah.
I had to be forced to read books.
Okay. Well, that's fine.
I know.
You've made up for it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I read all the thoughts. I did have some thoughts.
Yeah, good. I had some thoughts too, but I don't know that I remember them.
Oh, okay. You turned off the TV.
I turned off the TV. This is what I do. I'm fully engaged. I had thoughts. Oh, that's over now. I don't do that with everything, but sometimes.
Well, the boys can travel through mirrors, and I kind of loved the Alice Through the Looking Glass kind of reference.
Yeah.
And that also that sets it up immediately. You know it's going to be weird. So you just like embrace that it's going to be weird.
Yeah, because if you don't realize that they're like not dead, if you're like in a Ghostbusters mindset, that changes the second he jumps through a mirror.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so really quick. Charles and Edwin hide outside the window when Death comes for the rescued World War II ghost. Mm-hmm. I'm like, how does she know to collect the ghost but not the boys?
Yeah, how does just hiding work?
Yeah, I'm like, she must know that they're there and be respecting their will. I mean, she obviously has some discretion because she left Wilfred, the World War I ghost, behind until he could get to a better place.
Yeah, there seems to be a consent there.
Right.
And it's almost like the boys just don't want to talk to her because they think she'll convince them.
Maybe. She was convincing.
She is convincing.
She's so beautiful.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, she could convince me.
She's so kind.
I'm so straight and she could convince me.
Okay, I did have another thought about her, though.
Oh, okay.
Is this... Have you had the sitcom Ghosts?
Oh, yeah.
Right? That's a cute little show.
Uh-huh.
Right? And then you remember Ghost Whisperer?
Yeah.
Okay, Ghost Whisperer is another one of my vices. I love that show so much.
Uh-huh.
And I was thinking, it's like the world just melded together with those shows. It's like a very...
Okay.
So Death, I was like, oh, she has such a Jennifer Love Hewitt
like
thing going
vibe
on.
about her.
Yes. Go into the light.
Aww.
Cross them over.
Charles accuses Edwin of not liking new things. And I'm like, well, I guess some personality traits just transcend one's plane of existence.
I guess so.
Because I'm going to bet he didn't like new things much when he was alive.
I'm going to bet that as well.
I'm really annoyed that we don't learn the payment methods that the dead boy detectives accept, and what do they need payment for.
Right.
Like, once I realized it was in the same realm of the Sandman.
Okay.
Then I understood a little more of like why they need payment. Like they're going to either they want to trade it or they're going to get some satisfaction out of something that they would accept as payment in some way.
So there wasn't like a currency in Sandman? Okay.
No, but people would require payment for help.
Okay.
So
we have yet to learn.
We have yet to learn. I hope we learn. I don't know, but I'm like, is there some sort of like afterlife credit card processing? What's happening here?
Right. Right. Because the little girl, I'm just a little girl. Like he totally dissects that.
Yes.
And then they pan to the pet, and that was really funny.
The pet was hilarious.
That was funny.
It was really funny. And I have a feeling that my 16-year-old is going to be like, I want one of those pets. I'm going to have to figure out how to make it.
Yes, you will.
I wonder if you have to be susceptible to demon possession, because I've not known any psychics, real or otherwise. And I don't know if they're more likely to be demonified than other people.
I will not say anything.
Okay.
I have continued watching.
Oh, okay.
So stay tuned.
Okay. Good to know. And the demon being named David was hilarious to me.
Why?
Just because it's like a name. It's like a normal name.
Like a normal name.
It's like a normal name. He's not like, so
Lucifer.
Right.
Or something.
We're watching Good Omens.
Okay.
Also written by Neil Gaiman.
Okay.
Because my 16-year-old's obsessed, which is why I think they'll like this
Oh,
show.
For certain. Then.
Yes, they're gonna like both of these. Well, the primary characters in that are named Crowley and Aziraphale.
Oh, right. Yeah. Like, these like Aramaic feeling kind of names.
Yes. These like, yes. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, but his name's David. It was very funny to me. I had to pause it and laugh. Okay. So I don't know if you noticed this, but the flyer for the missing Becky Aspen is super weird. So there's like a missing flyer. Okay. Yeah, and I paused it to look at it.
Okay. The one she's holding?
Yes.
Okay.
That's when she gets the that Crystal gets the feeling while she's holding it. Okay. So you would expect there to be things like age, description of her clothing, who she might be with, where she was last seen. That's the kind of information you would expect to see on this.
Yeah.
No. It's got like a list of her hobbies and character traits. She's responsible. Unlikely to go with a stranger. Loves soccer. Weird stuff.
That is weird.
It was so funny.
I do. Okay.
It was one of those like pause it and it's so funny thing.
You're going to need to pause another place.
Okay.
As you continue watching.
Okay.
A flyer.
Okay.
Appears again in a different scenario. Okay. Remember, this was the flyer that the postman had brought.
Right.
Yes,
the quote unquote postman.
Quote unquote postman. So it brought the flyer. Compare it. I'll be interested to know if the flyers are the same.
Okay.
Or if that's a specialized flyer for the detectives based on the other missing, or whether they're the same, and that's really weird.
Or whether the postman brings a special flyer for them.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But if it's the same as the other thing, then no.
Okay.
If it's different, then we realize that the postman brings
a
special flyer with certain things that might be helpful for them to understand.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know.
So pause. Second episode.
Okay.
I think it's the second. Yeah.
Okay. Did you get strong Sweeney Todd vibes from the butcher?
Yes, no, I did.
I really did. Mm-hmm. And then there was the whole, the butcher is also the landlord, and there was nary a sheet of paperwork in order for Crystal to rent this room.
Yeah, no, it was small town under the table kind of stuff going on.
Yes, and I'm
This
like,
was-
to suspend my disbelief, and also more Sweeney Todd vibes.
Yes, like it's really creepy.
Nobody knows you're here, but I like the butcher.
I do, and I don't think she's legally allowed to rent out these rooms, and I think that's the whole thing.
Yeah,
like somehow. But how does she know about it? How did Crystal find it?
yeah.
Where is it advertised?
Psychic abilities.
Maybe.
So resources. Little Becky was kidnapped, and if it's a witch that has kidnapped somebody in your life, I can't really help you with that.
No.
But fortunately, most missing kids or people aren't taken by literal witches.
No.
So there is help. So the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, missingkids.org. Can I say I really appreciate that they made their website missingkids.org,
right,
and not NCMEC.
Right, like something normal, like something you would think about typing in.
Right, yeah, not the acronym, but missingkids.org is so much easier to remember. They have lots and lots of resources available, particularly if you're in the US. They have emotional and professional support. So if your child has gone missing and you need support, or if they've been found and you need support, they've got that there. Then they also have reunification assistance. So if your family is not in a position to fly your child home, if they need to travel some distance to get home, they can help you with that. They also have Team Hope, which is a group of volunteers who have personal experience with a missing or exploited child. So they've been through it and they want to help. So that's a peer support group for families, which is really, really helpful. And then legal assistance, because, when children go missing, sometimes you have to, involve the law in a more than just I've gotten my child back capacity, and they can help with that.
A lot of missing situations are family related.
Right.
And so a lot of missing kids are not abducted necessarily, as much as it is custody battle, where a parent has quote unquote abducted. They're not often in immediate danger or harm.
Right.
But they have violated custody laws. There is reason to get them back.
Right.
They're not but the other parent has absconded and tried to stay hidden.
Yes.
And so a lot of times, when we're talking about that, that's why these resources are so important, because it's not necessarily like always trying to find someone who's been abducted by a stranger.
Right.
It's
In
usually
fact,
very close to home.
Right. Yeah. It's actually pretty rare.
Yeah, actually pretty rare.
But if you're not in the U.S. or you are traveling to another country, there is an organization called Hostage International, and they will help families deal with kidnapping or arbitrary detention is what they call it. So they might be detained by law enforcement in a country that you're traveling to, and that's not necessarily considered abduction, but they might be considered hostages. They have free and confidential support for families. They have a lot of information on their website about how to deal with that, how to recover from that. So if what you want to do is read, but they also have resources. So whether you're recovering from a hostage situation or whether you need help understanding what resources are available in a country that's not your own, where maybe you don't speak the language, this is a good help for you.
That's a great resource.
Yeah. After being held hostage, the American Psychological Association has some recommendations. They want people to know that 3 things are particularly common after being held hostage: thinking, emotions, and interactions. So you might have thinking as intrusive thoughts. You might be overly cautious. You might be confused or fear or impaired memory. Those are normal. Emotions, anxiety, guilt, helplessness, all normal. Withdrawal and avoidance is part of the interactions. Again, normal. And typically those things are going to get better with some time. You need to be patient, but they do get better with time. When a hostage is released, whether it's a child being kidnapped or an adult who's been detained in some way, the first thing you should do is make sure they get medical attention. They may have been harmed or had some neglect happen. So you definitely want to address that immediately. Get the victim to a safe and secure environment. Have them connect with loved ones, give them the opportunity to talk or journal about their experience. So connecting with loved ones and talking or journaling might be well done under the advice of a counselor of some kind, because trauma is very difficult to deal with and it's going to be hard for everybody. So having somebody who even just to help you navigate that and help you understand what's normal and how to kind of start to recover from it. You may never fully recover from it, and that's also okay. It's a experience that will change you or a loved one. You want to protect their privacy. Try not to, if it's a high profile case, you want to limit the number of interviews that they do. And you don't want to watch too much news coverage about what's happening, especially right after the fact. Give yourself some time to process it with a counselor, or give your loved one time to process it with a counselor before you really expose yourself to all of it.
Ooh, yeah.
And don't read the comments.
No.
And take your time to get back to your normal sort of life.
So here's how it works. Christy wrecks her search history. Hey, an essay. We promise it's nothing more nefarious than a podcast. To find out what's true, some of the psychological motivations behind the characters' actions, and real-life applications that relate to our topic. I have no idea what Christy decided to look up. Could be the same thing that captured my curiosity, or something I never thought of.
Is it true?
Well,
no.
This is a silly one.
Yes.
So, no, it's not true.
But there are some things.
We think it's not true.
We'll get there. We're going to get there.
Wrong section. Okay, I got you. No.
So, but there are some things that I wanted to check. So Wilfred the Ghost was in the World War I Museum in London. Is there a World War I museum in London?
I'm certain there has to be one.
Okay.
I don't know if it's, an ultimate or some sort of large tourist, but I'm sure somebody has a flat with a garden that's a museum somewhere.
Good one. There isn't a large museum that is specifically World War I.
Okay.
But the Imperial War Museum has an atrium called the First World War Gallery.
Oh, okay. There you go.
And they have over 1,300 objects in their collection that's very pristine, quite well preserved. And if you can't make it to London, they have an online archive.
Oh, good. There you go.
Then there's also the National Army Museum, and it has over 2,000 objects related to the First World War. They're not all together in one gallery. They're spread across thematic galleries throughout the museum.
Okay.
So what's interesting and notable about their collection is they made an intentional effort to tell the story of women's involvement in the war, which I really
interesting.
appreciate. And they also have an online exhibition.
That's cool.
For their World War I artifacts. So if you're interested in that, that is not a thing that I want to spend a lot of time with. I don't particularly love war museums.
No, you're not a war museum or movie
I
don't
want war movies. I mean, it's got to be it's got to be like Indiana Jones. Let's be honest.
That's fair.
The most recent Indiana Jones movie where they went back in time and saw a war, I was good with that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so Edwin needs his book about the minor arcana. Do you have any idea what that means?
I mean, I feel like it's like small spells.
Okay. That's actually not far off.
Okay.
Okay. So really what the minor arcana is, sometimes they're called the lesser arcana, and they're suits of cards in the tarot deck.
Okay. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. I was like, the word is so familiar
Right.
that I'm like, but now that you say that, I'm like, oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're things that have to do with the subtleties of day-to-day life.
Right. Okay.
So there, in the minor arcana in tarot, there are 4 suits. There's the cups that are feelings, emotion, intuition, and creativity. Pentacles, finances, work, and material possessions. Swords, which is thoughts, words, and actions. And wands that represent your energy and motivation. And the idea of these things is they have a temporary influence over you, and that depending on the actions you take, they can be changed. Okay. Here's what I think is interesting about that is that despite the fact that it had been like 100 years that this ghost was rattling around this museum and afflicted with this problem.
Yeah.
It was temporary for him. They understood it to be immediately something that they could do, they could change to improve his existence, because what is happening to him is a small and temporary thing.
Yeah.
100 years of something to us would be not a temporary thing. It would be an entire life. But because he had entered this new plane of existence,
It was a temporary thing.
it's a temporary thing, which
That's so interesting. Because, like, not only is it temporary in the longer plane of existence, but that temporary thing still had a hold on him. And so it's interesting how we let small things that we actually have agency over control us.
Right.
Like, take off your gas mask.
Right.
I thought.
Right. But see,
But he couldn't.
But he couldn't. And he didn't know. He couldn't make the connection that the gas mask was the thing that was causing him the pain.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting that there's a temporary small thing that if we could just figure out how to take off the proverbial gas mask,
then we could
move on.
This is the fun part about tarot.
I mean, right?
I mean, because I'm not super into. I have my delightful set that you gave me. That's the Golden Girls, and it's fun.
Yeah,
but it is weird because when you do the thing and you ask the question, it's weird how on the nose it is about the insight,
right?
And it's because it's doing that thing. It's breaking down human existence, like, you know, the typical things that humans, you know, encounter, and sort of like at any moment you're going to have a thought, emotion, you know, motivation and all these things. So, hey, you're going to get insight to one of those, and maybe that's the way you...
Right, that you break. It just gives you a new perspective of looking at your life. Whether those cards are divinely inspired by when you pull them or not.
Right.
It can give you a new perspective.
Yes.
I don't have an opinion about it either way, honestly.
I really don't. I liken it more to journaling than I do something spiritual.
Okay.
Because journaling does the exact same thing.
Right.
In some ways. For some people, if that's the thing. I have no preferences in life, so if somebody's going to tell me something to think about. So tarot is more fun.
Yeah.
If you ask me to journal, I'm going to be like, sky is blue today.
Yeah.
Cloudy.
You need a prompt.
I do need a prompt. I need a prompt. Yes.
There we go. So Wilfred, when death comes to collect him after he's been freed of his gas mask that's been cursed, he remembers a Kipling poem.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what that was.
Do you understand it to be a real poem?
I don't.
Okay.
But maybe it is.
So Rudyard Kipling wrote the poem in 1904, and it's called The Sack of the Gods.
Okay.
And it's kind of talking about relationship between people over time. Lord of the Inca race and the Queen of the Sea hotly stormed Valhalla 1,000,000 years ago.
Right.
So there's many verses about that, but it comes to this one quote at the very end.
Right.
They will come back again as long as the red earth rolls. He never wasted a leaf or a tree. Do you think he would squander souls? It's quite beautiful.
It is really pretty.
It's very pretty, and like, interesting. And he thought of that because he was curious about the idea of reincarnation, because he had spent some time in India and he understood the belief in reincarnation to be widespread.
Right.
Is there a widespread belief of reincarnation in India now?
I don't think it's near as widespread. I think it's changed. And I also think there's probably this mainstream idea of it and then this like actual kind of, what it is in the religious, idea.
Sure.
But I don't think it's probably as mainstream as it once was.
Sure. I would agree with that. A 2021 review by the Pew Research said that India has a lot of religious traditions. They have maybe more now than they did at that point in time. And that reincarnation, while it's a mainstream teaching in Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, and Jainism, fewer than half of Indians in each of these groups say they believe in reincarnation. So it's interesting because what they mean by reincarnation is a continual cycle of rebirth.
Right.
Many more Hindus and Jains believe in moksha, which is the liberation of the cycle from rebirth. So they believe in reincarnation to the point where you have achieved some sort of enlightenment, that you understand the soul and the universe, and you have a separateness from material possessions that will allow you to break free of it. So that is actually a more common one rather than a continual cycle of rebirth. Also, most Indians, regardless of their religious tradition, believe in karma and believe in fate, but not astrology.
Interesting, right?
Yeah. It was an interesting sort of little situation. Like, I get that.
I mean, I kind of do too, because I'm not in it.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't know. My thoughts about fate are ephemeral. They change all the time.
Yeah.
I used to believe in, the fated love, the soulmate. I don't believe in that anymore. Maybe I will again someday. I kind of doubt it. This has been a while now. But
yeah,
I
don't know. You can tell the difference between cultures and the type of stories they tell.
Sure.
And it's funny because the U.S., by and large, we have this need for a redemption arc. The big phoenix rising from the ashes. This is why we love superheroes. Right? And in other stories don't have that. Like other cultures are not so bent on that whole character overcoming thing. That's a very U.S. ideal. It's a very individualistic ideal because it's about the idea that you can by yourself in some way overcome, right? And that's like the idea of fate is that somehow there's a redemption arc, and so that the story at the end creates this whole rising, and becoming this becoming thing. And so that's a very U.S. thing. I don't know how other cultures really, talk about fate without it because I'm so ingrained in this one.
Right.
So but I've heard beautiful things.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I could even weave together a story that would be about fate that doesn't totally have a redemption or some sort of
Okay.
Yeah,
like that makes it all okay.
Yes, the thing that makes it all okay. Or the thing that makes me okay.
Oh.
Right?
Oh, but there's something kind of beautiful about redemption, especially in smaller ways. And I'm thinking mainly of Ted Lasso because overall, that show on Apple TV Plus is almost every character gets a redemption.
They do.
And even the quote unquote good ones, the ones who you don't think need a redemption actually do. And they all get it in some way. But I don't necessarily see it as fate or even like an overcoming. It's just we're all worth understanding our own value.
That's true.
Yeah.
I think the issue is, though, everything turns out okay. And that's the difference.
Right,
Happy
yeah.
endings.
Yeah, well, because we like happy endings.
U.S. people do,
Yes.
for certain. I mean, it's not like that other westernized kind of cultures don't also, but the U.S. is uniquely positioned in their
Sure.
individualism for
That's-
everything to just turn out okay, have the happy ending.
super fair.
Whereas other cultures do not. They don't actually need the happy ending, quote unquote, to be happy. And so that's worth digging into.
Right.
I understand it. I read it. I see it. I can't make a story like that hardly. Right? Yeah. It's just very difficult.
Well, it's like it'll all be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. Keep going.
Yeah, that's
a very American saying.
very American, you know.
And I want to believe it.
And I'm here for it because I'm American. I want it, but I also know that I want it because I recognize the cultural influence and my desire for it even.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. It's interesting stuff.
So Charles wants Edwin to practice boxing because he might need to defend himself even as a ghost. And he calls it the gentleman's sport to make it more palatable for Edwin. Is it a gentleman's sport? Are there other gentleman's sports?
No, not boxing. Nothing is violent. I hate those things. I'm so against it. I try really hard because I got people in my family who like
Yeah, MMA.
this thing. And I'm like, it takes every fiber of my being to engage with this because I hate it.
Unfortunately, it is a gentleman's sport.
Yeah, it's a gentleman's sport.
Gentleman Zone defines gentleman sports as a diverse group of athletic activities and games that involve a degree of competition and requires speed, strength, and other physical abilities alongside logic, precision, and elegance. They're seen as rough and tough, but also imply honor and class. So boxing, by definition, is considered a gentleman's sport because it is violent, it's rough and tumble, but there are rules that are supposed to force you to behave honorably.
Yep.
I don't like it either.
I know. And
But
I
I'm
say
like-
this as somebody who actually really appreciates martial arts.
Sure. Yes.
I do. I really, but I don't. I feel like they're describing martial arts, not boxing.
Okay.
And I think they want boxing to fit in.
I think maybe, I would say maybe boxing in the UK is maybe a little different than what we're used to in the US.
Or maybe in Edwin's day.
Yeah, certainly in Edwin's day, though we did see boxing in The Gentleman. And there, you know, because there are rules, it makes sense that they would choose boxing because it's a gentleman's sport, and also a lot of betting goes on around it. So
Money.
yeah, money.
It's money.
Yeah,
It's money.
it's money. That's what makes it gentlemanly.
It's money. And
Which
it's
is-
easier to bet because you're on one person, not a team
Yeah,
where anybody could.
yeah,
This is why people love fantasy football and fantasy baseball and fantasy, all this stuff, because even though it's a team, you pick your players, and the individual competition of their achievement that night
Right.
is what helps.
that's it. Other gentleman sports: golf, polo, croquet. Okay. Tennis, baseball, cricket, snooker, sailing, skiing, fencing, motorsport, flying a plane, chess, and fishing.
Okay, these I can get behind.
Like,
even the
whatever.
fencing. I can even with the
fencing.
fencing because it's arcane. Like we don't use that. Nobody's using a sword in life anymore.
Yeah,
so
especially
now
not the
it's-
little like pointy one.
no.
And there's like a little thing on the end so nobody really
Nobody
gets
gets
hurt, and you wear certain clothing, and if it's
Yes.
professional, there's like a little wire so to make sure you are playing fair. And
Yeah, like it's not the same thing as if you can get a cauliflower ear, it's no longer gentlemanly.
that's super fair. I agree. I'm with you, and we disagree with Gentleman Zone. No.
No cauliflower ear.
Maybe this is why I'm not a gentleman, because I think that's baloney. So Becky went missing in Port Townsend, Jefferson County, Washington. Is this a real place?
No. I'm going to say no.
It is a real
What?
place.
Really?
Yes.
I felt like it was a conglomeration of
That's
different
what I would have
things.
thought. Now, it was filmed in like Toronto, I think.
Okay.
But the actual city, Port Townsend, is about 2 hours north of Seattle. In 2023, Budget Travel called it the coolest small town.
Really?
Yes, because they have all kinds of like outdoorsy things to do because it's kind of on the coast.
Yeah.
So there's mountains and forests that are like, nice and tall because they get a lot of rain, but it's right there near the water, and there's fresh and saltwater stuff. So you can go kayaking, fishing, crabbing, whale watching.
I mean, I want to go.
I mean, for real, you can go hike the trails. You can take a like 4-wheeler up the trails into the forests and
Yeah.
things. They have a marine science center. Which don't tell my kid, or that's
I mean, that's where we're
like,
gonna go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they also have like a farm where you can go and pick your own lavender and pumpkins and blueberries and pet sheep and stuff.
Oh.
I mean, there's all kinds of like cool stuff to do in this little
Wow.
Pacific Northwest town.
Wow. It's not going to be a small town for long.
We'll see. All of the sources that we use to inform our discussion here on Killer Fun Podcast can be found on our social media. Join us on Facebook at Killer Fun Podcast, exploring the intersection of crime and entertainment. You can find us on Twitter at Killer Fun Pod, or you can send us an email at killerfunpodcast@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share a link to whatever information you're looking for. We love to hear from you. You might learn a little something too. Psychology break.
All right.
So the butcher that Crystal rents the room from says that everyone is just thinking about themselves all the time. And I looked at some stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
So Psychology Today has an article by Dr. Grant Hillary Brenner from 2018. And he says, Freud sort of first talked about this as primary narcissism, where we kind of have this innate tendency to be self-centered. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know how we feel about Freud, and he did a lot of like kind of shooting from the hip and things that he'd observed, and then they go and like study it later, and dang it if he wasn't right.
Well, no.
In some
So that
instances.
So, yeah, Freud's hard. Here's the thing about Freud. Freud had a lot of good ideas, but his ideas were not operationalized for research.
Right.
Okay, so when you start breaking them apart, the models don't hold.
Right.
By and large.
Right. But some of the theories.
But the idea that he had evolved into better theories.
Okay.
Not that his theories were right necessarily, but that better models that operationalized and gave better language to, and kind of came from it. No doubt he was the father of a lot of the idea, but he was so far off on the mechanisms that it really renders even the idea like it's maybe not even helpful.
Okay.
Because if you don't understand the mechanism behind it, or what's the typical way it unfolds, then how helpful is it? It was very helpful in research. He wasn't a psychologist.
Right.
He wasn't a psychiatrist.
Right.
That didn't exist.
Right.
He was a doctor.
Right.
And he had some very good observations. And
Okay.
he was somewhat scientific in the way he observed. And he had a great idea. So he should not be invalidated. But I think it's not quite right to say that his theories were like supported in research.
Okay.
But you can kind of see the evolution of how, like, if you trace some theories, you can trace them back to like ideas.
Right. Yeah.
That
So
makes
he
sense,
looked
yeah.
at this and he said, I have this idea about it. And then people go about trying to prove it, and they realize not everything's right, but not everything's wrong.
No,
either.
yeah, exactly.
Right. And yeah. And I mean, he came at things from a very racist and sexist point of view, which is
Implicitly, though.
Yeah.
Like right?
Right.
Like he didn't so much intend to be.
Right. It just,
Yeah.
it was the culture in which he
Yeah.
was in. Yes.
Yeah, he's hard because it's just he's
Yeah. Yeah.
he's a little like a carnival act. Well, because, he's like a
He's
psychic.
like, I was just going to say, he's like a psychic.
He's vague enough that he seems right all the time.
That's super fair.
And so it's like, okay, well, that's fine if that's helpful and insightful for you. And psychoanalysis certainly has evolved from there and incorporated other things. But in general, he's so vague about, even as he's specific, he's so vague about some things that you're like, well, I can see how that would work right. Yeah, okay. Well,
Okay. Researchers were looking at this, studying what's called the default mode network. No, good. I'm glad that seems like where you understand that.
Oh, yes.
So
that's
it's
very,
like,
yes.
it's like your idle brain. What does your idle brain tend to think about? Does it tend towards thinking about the self? And so researchers were looking at things to try and understand if the anatomy supported that.
Right.
And I just thought it was really interesting. And they kind of found a particular area of the brain that they thought might be this DMN, the default mode network center.
Right.
And we're trying to understand if that was if that's what was actually happening in that part of the brain. And if you were to like pull apart the two hemispheres of the brain, it's right there in the middle.
Yes.
Which makes sense. That's the most protected part of the brain. It's the part that you're using to think about yourself. And it's most protected so you don't lose yourself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the original brain. So you have your hind brain that's connected to the rest of your body, right? Then you have this midbrain right here. This is the original. This is our lizard brain.
Yeah. Okay.
This is how we live.
Yeah.
Survive.
Yeah.
And it begins sentience.
Okay.
But then it's the rest of our big brain that's all wrinkly and stuff, the cortex, the hemispheres, as you say, like the frontal cortex and all that stuff. That's the stuff that we develop that makes us.
Right.
That's what makes humans different.
Right.
And so it's protected, but it also deals with keeping us alive.
Right.
So
what they did was they were trying to study what areas of the brain were active when they asked people about 4 different situations, when considering their own qualities, when considering someone else's qualities, when processing general semantic information, and when they were at rest.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
DMN. Basically, what they found is the area that they thought of really was more active when you're asking people about themselves. Like that part of the brain fired, and it fired more quickly than another part of the brain when you're asking about other things, either other people or because you can look at them a little more objectively and you have to think about them. What do I know about
Theory
this
of
person?
mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. All of that. They did find that when they did many studies of a certain group of people, they did this 40 times where they're asking about different things or just looked at them when they were at rest. Don't think about anything. Clear your mind. Don't think about anything. And that part of the brain that they thought would be active and was active when asked about themselves was the part that was most active when they were at rest. So it is kind of a central sort of thing happening in your brain.
Yeah.
The same things are active at the different points. And now they want to replicate these studies because they want to control for things like culture, life experience, profession, personality, and different pathological states. So people who have PTSD tend to not be able to rest to the point where that part of their brain is active enough to be healthy. And that's part of it. And they talked about clinically, if they can look at your brain and where it's firing, they might be able to better tailor therapies and or medicational assistance to be able to actually help people in a beneficial way. And that's why they want to do more study on it. But it was very interesting at the end of the article. They said, when you settle down and are not engaged in any particular activity and your default mode network kicks in, the reason, quote unquote, you tend to think about yourself is because of the activity of a small part of your brain. You're just wired to think about yourself when it's a quiet moment.
Yeah.
And it's okay. So you shouldn't beat yourself up about it.
Thank God we spend most of the rest of the day thinking about everybody else and everything else.
especially as women.
Yeah, especially as women. Yeah, the gender differences. That's very interesting as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really it is. This is where Freud and his id. It seems to be. It's not like he was off. He just was philosophical about it. He wasn't psychological about it.
Okay.
And that's
I
the
appreciate
connect,
that.
right?
Okay.
So like the id, it does matter, like this idea that we do think about ourselves, right? And we need to. You're right. We've got to like give ourselves some slack. It's okay to actually just think about yourself.
Well, and that's kind of where you like determine who you are and what you think about things too. Sometimes is when you have this quiet moment. And if you can, like, if you think something that's troubling, don't just be like, holy moly, I shouldn't think that anymore. Almost said a bad word right there.
I know, right? We almost violated our principles on this show.
That's right.
Because we never cuss.
It's okay if you think those things, maybe like analyze, what are my biases? Why am I thinking this way? What I don't like that I'm thinking this way. Why not? And what can I do to change it?
Yeah.
Rather than being really hard on yourself.
Right. And that's the thing about the PTSD. It doesn't kick in.
Right.
And it's like people who have hard time getting to the default mode. It's too much. We burn out. We spin our wheels.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to be quiet and calm, even if it's not a conscious amount of like narrative, to be calm and to actually take care of ourselves and do things that are like natural instincts for ourselves instead of denying them or getting in the way of our, reflexes and all that,
What's it like to not have a constant dialogue going on in your head? Because I don't know.
I don't know. Because I definitely have some moments, but I don't have a lot.
Yeah, no.
I don't have a lot.
There's not a lot of quiet in my brain.
No, but I do like the quiet around me.
Sure.
So that I enjoy my thinking.
Sure.
Because sometimes, you know what I mean? Like enjoy the thinking through and the wondering and all of that instead of being pulled into a different idea somewhere else.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right. So those sweet dead boys, they died and they didn't matter, or at least that's how they felt.
That was so sad.
And they really wanted to make sure other people matter, and mattering is super important, evidently, even after you die. But Scientific American has an article from 2022 about how mattering really influences your mental health, and that how much you feel like you matter to other people really predicts depression, suicidal thoughts, and other mental problems, or mental ills is what they said. And it can foretell physical resilience among the elderly, which I thought was really interesting. So Gregory Elliott, a Brown University sociologist, says there are 3 components to mattering: awareness, importance, and reliance. So awareness is, do people pay attention to you or do they walk right by? Importance, do you have people who take a real interest in your well-being? Reliance, are there people who would come to you for help, support, or advice? And all of these things are really important to particularly to adolescents and the elderly. So he did a big study in 2009, and they found that teens, when they feel like they mattered less in their family unit, antisocial, aggressive, and self-destructive behaviors went up. Ooh. And when they mattered more in their family, those were much more minimal.
Isn't that so interesting?
And it's really so small what you have to do to make them feel like they matter.
I know. And see, this is the problem with the individualistic society, is like, it's not that hard to achieve, but it's really easy to fail at it.
Yeah. Yes. If you're not getting it in your family unit, you can get it from your work and your community. And that it's what they call a virtuous cycle, particularly in work and community. It may be a little less so in family, but it also works there, where the more you feel like you matter, the more you contribute to the group, and the more people appreciate it, which makes you feel like you matter.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
So like it's this cycle. And if you can just start the cycle, then it's going to be helpful. And if you're in a job where you feel like you really matter, you're less likely to have burnout.
Yeah.
Not an impossibility. Anybody can burn out if they're pushed to a certain level.
Right,
Now you
sure.
can really appreciate nurses and they can still have burnout.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But the more they feel like they matter in their job, the less likely they are to have burnout. And they also kind of found that not mattering contributed to not only suicide, but homicide.
Ooh. I shouldn't be laughing.
But it was the kind of thing where I went, ooh, because the next thing they say is that all the mass shooters that we have basically said they felt like they didn't matter.
Right.
And they were like, let me show you how much I matter.
Oh, no, that's for sure. That's not laughable.
No.
And yet, I think women make a lot of jokes about this when wives laugh about their husbands.
Oh, okay.
But we don't matter. Right. And so there's lots of crimey TV about the husband doesn't know me at all. And so I can't help but think of a lot of that there's this whole joke area and then there's a whole dark area. It's a very dark area.
Oh, well, it is a really dark
Overlaps.
area. But let me tell you, there was this I just watched the new Netflix documentary about Ashley Madison because even though it's awful, that Ashley Madison stuff is terrible on a lot of different levels. Mm-hmm. Anytime there's a new documentary about Ashley Madison, I can't wait to watch it. And there's something wrong with me. I'm broken. But I really want to watch it. But that's what it is. It's my wife doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
Or not that my wife doesn't matter, because a lot of it was that people who didn't want to blow up their marriages but wanted something else in addition to it. And it was instead of just talking to their spouse about what they wanted, they just
decided
joined Ashley Madison. It ruined a lot of people.
Yeah.
But the simple thing you can do is just if a shopkeeper notices that a regular hasn't been there for a while and says, I haven't seen you for a while. How are you?
Yeah.
That's mattering. That's the smallest thing that it takes to make your kids or your old people feel like they matter.
Yep. Yeah.
Is a small thing. How are you today? And be genuinely interested.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they don't answer in a way that's genuine, they don't want to get into the whole thing. They know somebody cares.
They know somebody saw them to be seen. To
be noticed that they hadn't been in the shop for a while.
Mm-hmm. Small things. Real life ish. I mean, ish unlike a lot of the.
I told you we were going to get around to some stuff.
Are ghosts real?
This is what I asked.
Okay, are ghosts real? Okay, all right.
Yeah. So, distinguished professor emeritus of sociology Barry Markowski did a article for The Conversation for the University of South Carolina. And a little girl, Madeline, age 11, asked him, is it possible for there to be ghosts? And I loved the very first thing he says is, lots of people believe in ghosts. I was like, okay.
Okay.
And a 2021 poll of 1,000 adults in the U.S., 41% said they believe in ghosts.
Okay.
And 20% claim that they had a personal experience with them.
Wow.
So that would be 50 million encounters in the U.S. alone. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot. And we don't have a lot of evidence for that. He said, along with others who practice scientific skepticism, I keep an open mind while maintaining that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Uh-huh. Are ghosts possible? He says a lot of people believe that they are because they witness things that they don't understand. They hear things they don't understand, and they kind of attribute it to ghosts. So sometimes ghosts can hover and fly without dissipating. They can manipulate physical objects, which means they act like matter. But then they go through a wall.
Right.
And that's not acting like matter. So he says physicists have found nothing that behave like ghosts. So a physicist will say ghosts don't exist. Okay. We do feel like we have a lot of evidence now for ghosts because we have mobile phones with cameras on them and microphones. And it seems like we should have a lot of evidence. But a lot of that is ambiguous.
Right.
It's often in low light or in awkward conditions, things like that. So like there was he's talking about a person who insisted that they had ghosts in their store.
Okay.
Because they had caught them on camera. Okay. There were sounds and floating orbs. Okay. And when they looked at the floating orbs on the video footage, the way that they behaved was that they created an optical illusion. They were very close to the camera, but they diffused light in a way that made them look like they were floating around, but they never went behind other objects. So because they were very, very close. And then the sounds that they heard, well, 3 sides of the building had noisy things happening on the other side of them during the times that the store was closed.
Yeah.
So all of that could be explained. And he says, as for all the devices that ghost hunters use to capture sounds, electrical fields, and infrared radiation, they look scientific, but they're not. Measurements are worthless without some knowledge of the thing you're measuring. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe not.
Maybe not.
I mean, of course, there are lots of anecdotal.
For sure. And I mean, if you want to get weird about it and be like, oh, well, in quantum physics, like,
yes,
let's talk about like, binding atoms and doing all of these things and electrons and like we talk about quantum computing,
right?
And how we can send electrons, like we can basically, port them. I mean, there are interesting conversations about the ways that things interact on a different plane.
Sure.
So I think that keeps people's hope alive.
Right.
About ghosts, like that maybe we enter into the matter in a way that like is not us.
Right.
Right. Like not now.
It's certainly maybe there are things that we don't yet understand.
And maybe there's not.
Maybe there just are no ghosts and it's a human wish.
Yes.
To believe that we exist beyond our ultimate demise in life as we know it.
Yes. And
I don't know.
It's hope and narcissistic because instead of assuming that there's more to our universe that we don't understand about the way matter and atoms and all of this behaves, we assume it must be us from the other side.
Right. Not necessarily. What about psychic abilities? So there's a publication called Now from Northrop Grumman Aerospace Technology that was talking about this. Basically, not based on the data available. I love that they put it that way. Not based on the data available.
Yes. That's science.
Yes, that there's a fake it till you make it sort of situation with most psychics. They say something vague enough and they've trained themselves to pay attention to our reactions or listen to the things that we say. A lot of people who go to psychics, it's great if you bring something to you, whatever. A lot of people who go to psychics will offer up information. They'll offer, I'm hearing the letter R. Oh, well, Richard was my dad.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, yes, it's your dad.
Yeah. Like, and then they study micro expressions. And yeah.
Right. Yeah. They're reading into things and they get closer and closer to what feels like the truth because of something called the Forer effect, which is human beings. We naturally see the world through a lens of our own experience. Yeah. So I did also appreciate, though, that the author Doug Bonnarand, said, while scientific study hasn't turned up any evidence of psychic abilities, that doesn't mean that their discovery is impossible, that we just might not know what to measure at this point.
It's true.
I mean, it is true. And I appreciate that he's leaving hope alive for people who want to believe.
Because, it may, if we discover something, it may not look like what we expect it to look like either.
Kind of like Freud. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
Like, he's not altogether right, but he's not altogether wrong.
Right.
He just didn't understand it because he didn't have all the information.
And so he didn't have it. That's what operationalizing is, right? You need to know what you're measuring. So
that's right. Yeah. And no discussion, this is our lighter note, no discussion on psychic ability would be complete without some anecdotal evidence.
Oh, yes, of course. This is the fun part.
Yes, of course. But this particular anecdotal evidence from Jeff Tarrant, PhD, on Huffington Post, is at least from somebody who's had like some education and has experiences that he's looking to understand in a more scientific way. So he said when he was a kid, he really tried to believe in things like demonic possession, ghosts, aliens, because he lived in a abusive house from the time he was 9 until he was 20. And so he really understands now that he was a child having a wishful sort of thought about how he'd like to be out of that. And the easiest way to get out of that seemed like these sorts of fantastical sorts of stories. And then he started studying psychology, and that had a particular way of viewing the world. It was often atheistic, logical, rational, and it was the only sort of belief system that was considered to be valid in his training. Belief in the paranormal was associated with immaturity at best and psychopathy at worst.
Yeah, that's been a thing too.
Yeah. That said, he was studying at the University of Missouri, and a research assistant came to him, and he says, "It changed my life forever." He said, "I want to talk to you about my mom." He was like, "Okay." He proceeded to tell me a long and complicated story about his mother, Janet. Janet began spontaneously speaking South American tribal languages after participating in a heliotropic breath work session. So basically, she started making these noises, and she didn't know what they were, but she felt like they meant something, and they didn't sound random.
Okay.
So she recorded herself and started sending tapes, I guess. Well, it was 2013. Maybe it wasn't tapes. Maybe it was... Oh, she did send tapes. Maybe she was a woman of a certain age and felt like tapes were the way to go in 2013. I think it would be email. But she sent them out, and it took her like several years for somebody to be able to hear these and identify it. Or perhaps the tapes were sent prior to this. Maybe he's hearing the story in 2013.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. Okay, now I'm understanding it. Anyway, she ended up sending a tape to an anthropologist at the Smithsonian Institution, and he recognized that she was speaking a South American tribal language, and that her sounds weren't random, that they were actually part of the language, and it was prayers and teachings relating to Mother Earth.
Okay.
So that was very interesting. Dr. Tarrant asked if he could do some experiments on Janet.
Okay.
Did EEG brain imaging and asked her to do the things that allowed these vocalizations to come through. And he said that the brain activity looked like seizure activity.
Okay.
And he checked his equipment to make sure that it was functioning properly and found that it was working and that it was coming from a part of the brain involved in defining and perceiving the self-related thoughts, perception of the body, and autobiographical memory. So he was like, I don't know what happened, but something happened in her brain that's unusual and had not a explainable understanding.
Right. It didn't match any current models.
It didn't match any current models. It didn't behave the way we would expect that poor area of the brain to react under those circumstances. And so he kind of decided to turn this into a subject of research for himself. So he does say, unlike what we see in movies, they are not always consistent and the results are not always mind-blowing. I have seen enough to make me believe that our minds are capable of more than most of us dare to imagine. So, he's been told he's engaging in pseudoscience. What you're doing is a waste of time. He's giving legitimacy to people who are fraudsters, who are looking to exploit vulnerable people or grieving people. But he said he really just wants to understand it more, and that he likens it to so many things that we once thought were improbable or impossible, like medical cures and magnets. We just didn't understand them, and perhaps this is a developing field where we just don't know the right questions to ask yet. So I was like,
interesting.
Okay. So I think it's interesting.
It is interesting. Paranormal psychology, it is a thing.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't know. What is it? Is it just echoes of the past? Is somebody more attuned to it? Is it, from another dimension? Is it a ghost? I don't know. But it's so interesting.
It's weird. Or is there learning that occurred in a different way that most of us don't realize? Can they trace back the learning? Or is there some sort of genetic learning that was passed down that then only the genes expressed because of some sort of environmental thing?
Right. Yeah. They did this breathing work and what if generational memories?
Yeah. What if she's hooked into that genetic line and then, just like certain sort of diseases,
right?
You can see, you had a predisposition genetically and something allowed it to express. We just don't know what's possible.
Well, and they're just now starting to understand that trauma that affected a parental line several generations ago that happened before the person was born, right? Like, so if your grandfather or great-grandfather was in the Holocaust and then had a child after that, then they may have some changes in their genes that would pass some of that trauma down to their children. And we're just now starting to kind of explore it and try to understand it.
Yeah. Like what kind of predispositions are able to be passed? What are learned things so that then it's an environmental thing that then creates a learning, kind of cycle. It's very difficult. Genes and nature versus nurture.
This is true. This is true.
And what does it look like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I don't think it looks like the Dead Boy Detectives.
Probably not, unfortunately, because they are delightful.
They are wonderful. I love it.
Me too. All right. So next time, podcasters set out to investigate a cold case in Ireland. Unfortunately, not us. We don't get to go to Ireland. But they discover it might not be so cold after all in Bodkin. I'm excited to see Will Forte.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
It's it looks really fun.
It does look
a
good.
little bit of funny, but also a little bit of they say in the trailer, it's true, and with an asterisk, and it's overheard in a bar.
Yeah, right.
So
I love these kind of things.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. We know you make a choice when you listen to us. We don't just come on the radio, and we really appreciate it. Hey, tell a friend, because it's way more fun when you can listen with a friend. And until next time, be safe, be kind, and wash your hands.
Da, da, da.